First of all, I will talk just a little bit about general things we all probably subscribe to. We are in an educational space. And so I have a couple of things what we all need to understand before I move on to the larger issue, namely what does global citizen really mean? And so just we always, when we learn from past experiences, and we hope to translate those past experiences, whether it's innovation or not, into something that is productive and helpful. I've chosen this picture particularly because it is a picture of a library and it's the shelves, and that's what really people need to do when they study. They should look beyond the shelf. They should look through and find different things, because the library in itself is an aberration just by itself. It contains all the ideas from the entire world, and it's the heart of the university. And we always learn from others. And we learn very much from the entire world. We are not learning just in isolation. We always need to understand that we are a community. And that's what I would like to talk about. And this is my definition of aberration as it will develop. We live today no longer in our own little country. We live, as we all know, today in a global village. Whether we want to or not, we are suddenly realizing that we belong not just to any kind of ethnic group, we belong all to one family with lots of different family members. We need to work this out together. And there's no way for us today to get a narrow focus, become myopic, and try to think we can do things by ourselves. We have to become aberrant. That's sort of the kind of the trick for the future. The other component, which is extremely important, and it might be surprising for you, coming from somebody in the Department of German Studies, I very strongly emphasize that what we all need to do, what is happening actually all over the world, we need to work in synergies. We need to work toward interdisciplinary work. We need to learn from each other, because the problems that we all face today, and you're all aware of these huge problems, they are too complex for just few people or few disciplines or few individuals to solve. We are facing global challenges, but we have aberrant individuals who always will become the future leaders that help us to gain that knowledge or the understanding, because only the community can solve the problems that are faced by the community. So I call this the synergies, and in a very intriguing way, we can go through a very interesting process. You have heard, of course, a lot about STEM. Everyone is talking about STEM. That is what the president is saying. That's what the universe is saying. Everyone, and the money flows into STEM. And that's certainly true. We need to have innovation, or maybe not that much innovation, as you heard already. But what we also need, and I would like to emphasize this very strongly, coming from a humanities perspective, is we need to combine the scientific and artistic perspective. I had a student 2 years ago, a Chinese student. He was in my German literature class, and we had the best understanding when we talked about classical German literature and the design of cars. And we suddenly realized, my goodness, we can talk in a very aberrant way, in a philosophical level. He came from a Chinese background, he spoke perfect German, and we suddenly had a wonderful conversation where new things developed. Because philosophy and engineering, the arts and music, they all have something in common. And only if we bring this together will we be able to move forward. So my appeal is to all of us, let's not just simply subscribe to STEM, which is wonderful. Let's subscribe to STEAM and then march forward like the old steam engine. We still can do it, but let's do it all together. One wonderful example might be, again, very surprising coming from me in German studies. I would like to talk about medicine. And we all know traditional medicine, medicine based on maybe herbal stuff. We know increasingly that we need to incorporate Chinese medicine, we need to incorporate African medicine, we need to incorporate any kind of knowledge we can find, because only different kinds, aberrant knowledge, aberrant approaches can really help us addressing the challenges of the future. So what I'm doing right here is I'm showing you a picture of a medieval nun, Hildegard of Bingen, a major woman who developed in her own terms 12th century herbal medicine, and we still draw on her insights in terms of herbal medicine, which we can combine maybe with the latest research in pharmacology, and suddenly we have old and new, and with this we can march forward into the future. But we're already there, and I'm very happy just to emphasize, we do have this already, very aberrant medicine here on campus. We have the medicine of integrative medicine, where people begin to look at very different ways of studying how people are getting well. I have a colleague in neuroscience who has told me on one point that people today get much better health if they can combine in their healing process, after surgery, music, pictures, be in a good room with a window, have a good relationship, emotional relationship with the doctor or the nurse. This is not just medicine. This is the humanities component combined with medicine, and suddenly, voila, we have a different perspective. So we are already marching forward in this sense, and now I'm becoming a little bit more political, but you will forgive me that because I'm originally from Germany, and the whole notion that I like to propose is that as member of the global village, we must understand, of course, that we cannot have and cannot tolerate borders. So here you see the very famous Berlin Wall, and you see the juggler who just makes fun of the whole thing. The border wall was torn down, and the first peaceful revolution in the world in which not one individual died. The global village, that's what we're living in, cannot tolerate walls. If I want to learn from other people in Africa, Australia, or China, or Europe, I cannot tolerate walls. We need to understand each other. We need to be able to reach out to the other. So this is, for me, one of the major metaphors of what the future will hold for us. We must dismantle the walls. We must build a community, and in order to help each other. What does it all mean, and why is it all so important? You see here a lot of different things. If we want, and we do this anyway, collaborate across the world. In every country today that operates with commerce needs markets. That means we all need to exchange. We need to talk to each other. And we have a fundamental saying in our department, in foreign language department, it doesn't matter whether it's German, Chinese, Arabic, Russian, whatever, when you want to buy something, you speak your language. If you want to sell something, you speak the customer's language. And that means really we all need to learn, if you don't know too many foreign languages, but we need to learn how to communicate. Once we work out this, that we have better communication across cultural, religious, ethnic barriers, we will be able to work toward the global issues that are facing all of us. But I also would like to emphasize, in a very unusual way maybe, it's not enough just to know the language. You need also to understand the cultural, the historical background. I cannot get engaged with people from India or South Africa if I don't understand somehow their culture, their suffering, their struggles. And suddenly I will begin to realize, oh, we have the same struggle, maybe a little bit different time zones, but we are all together. So there needs to be deep knowledge. Only then can I draw, let's say, from their medical understanding, their approaches to engineering, their approaches to music and philosophy, and suddenly we have a much better instrument in our hands to then finally turn to the very practical things, have global trade and economics, have global science, and have global politics. That is no longer predicated on walls and building of villages with fortresses like in the Middle Ages, but rather openness where ideas can flow, and is cross-fertilization. I have here a reference to a major French sociologist whom I would like to bring in, who helps me a little bit to explain this better, namely Michel Foucault. If the slide goes back, there we go. And Foucault gave us this marvelous term. He talked about the archeology of knowledge. That means that only when we understand that we as individuals are historical beings, and we live sort of like everyone in the world on the top of many different layers. And only if I, like a geologist, am able to dig through the various layers, will I be able to understand how we have grown, where we have come from, what kind of soil I'm consisting of, and what kind of plants can grow on this. And so moving from this metaphor, or this image, to the global realization, you just saw the other slide. We are, of course, living in the world of about 6,000 to 7,000 different languages. And I'm not meaning just simply languages that are closely related like French and Italian or Latin, but we're talking about really completely different languages that have absolutely nothing in common with each other. And actually we are surrounded right here in Tucson by many different wonderful native languages, but they have nothing in common with the Indo-European languages. So in other words, if we want to build community, we need to struggle really hard and find common ways to reach out and build bridges across the language divide. That's sort of a metaphor, another image. What I want to aim for, the global citizen is an individual who is able and willing to reach out and to hold the other person's hand and then march forward, because only in a collective do we have the strength to approach the challenges. Let's say, in science, you need to collaborate. You need to have help from different disciplines. You cannot know everything. And that's the same thing in the humanities. We don't know everything, but we know and we're learning and aiming for this. And that's the future student, the global citizen. We know whom we can call up and say, hey, you know this. Well, how do I solve this issue? So global issues, and the global citizen is an individual able and willing to reach out and to hold the hand of the other person, because we need to march forward. You might know this beautiful image of the movie Casablanca. At the end, these two guys walking across the tarmac. This is the beginning of a long friendship, if you remember that. So anyway, so why ultimately then aim for this ideal? Because that's an ideal upon which the entire university is predicated, all of education globally, because only once we aim for these skills to reach out to other people, to learn languages, to understand, appreciate different cultures, will we finally be able also to overcome the problems that vex our world, such as war, famine, terror, and in general fear. So what we need really to do with a global citizen, once we begin to understand, communicate, and empathize with each other, will we be able finally to address fundamental issues that are not going away, but actually, I'm sorry to say, are getting worse. We have more wars than ever before, and we have more weapons of mass destruction than ever before. Right now, here I have my metaphor I want to leave you with to give you sort of a good sense of why the global citizen should be the future person. And I will give you two choices. You all understand these images. Let's say you are cooking or stewing a soup, and you have only, let's say, potatoes and water. That's it. Or you're calling up your friends let's say from Chile, or your friends from Argentina, or your friends from Russia, or from Germany. Hey, don't you have some spices? How about some herbs? Could you add something that could spice up my soup? And then I will ask you, do you want to have that soup? Or do you prefer to have that soup? That is the global citizen. That is the person who knows different languages, has gone, let's say, very practically to the market, farmer's market, has roamed around, has found strange spices, unusual herbs, has never seen those, and has suddenly thought, ooh, I could combine that. It's much healthier than this bland soup. So I think that is a very efficient metaphor telling you what aberration can mean in even very concrete terms. Let's say, indeed, you're going to the market, and there you decide you're not going to shop at the same shopkeeper as usual, but you're going to another shopkeeper who has suddenly imported different stuff you have never heard about. And then you're going to experiment, and you will find really an attractive, wonderful, healthy, and tasty soup. And that is, of course, our future. So that's what I want to aim for. And you have always two choices. You can choose to stay at home, or you can choose to boil a really rich or cook a really rich soup. And I think that is the choice is very clear. And that's where we want to kind of push all our students. We want our global citizens to know how to cook a rich soup. That's all we need, nothing else, basically. And there are many different ways. You can stay in a narrow world, or you can open up the world and reach out for the other side, other communities, other languages, cultures, religions. So reaching out, that is basically what we do anyway. I mean, in the humanities, that's what we do very much. I believe in the science we do this as well to some extent. This is global and international research. So I'm coming back to the word of synergies. That is kind of the willingness to embrace synergies and to accept that these are our goals altogether. We can build connections, and I have some very concrete examples. These are my values. The global citizen will be able to address them and help us all to overcome them. And then also, in terms of very personal things, we can reach out. So here's my wife and myself. She's a Japanese American. Then I have another couple. She is here running, Nikki Lee, running for city council and married with a black American. And then finally a PhD student in our department, Korean, German, and married an American. So basically my time is up. And I just leave that image there. It's just fine. I think you got the message that the global citizen can and will cook a good, rich soup. Thank you very much.